Diversity is a mix, inclusion is making the mix work. So you can have diversity and not have inclusion, you can have inclusion and not have diversity, and you need both coming together. And diversity is not this magical thing that if you get diversity in the door, voila, you get inclusion. You got to work both of them. But I want to drive us to a very commercially based argument as well. Biggest challenge that our companies face is to create growth. To create growth, you need to differentiate. To differentiate, you need to innovate. Otherwise, you're doing the same things as everybody else. But to innovate, you need diversity, because if you're saying let's think outside the box, but everybody's from the same box, then you're limited. You can't think outside the box and create things outside the box. However, that's the mix, right? But to activate that diversity, you need inclusion. I can have diversity around the table, but if I ignore, overlook, dismiss, ridicule, roll my eyes to the diverse input around the table, then I don't have inclusion. And guess what? How do we activate this chain reaction from right to left? We need inclusive leaders.
What pieces of this model in particular speak to you, and how have you fostered inclusive leadership at Manpower, let's just say, where you're currently at?
When I think about good leadership, this is the model. It's not just about inclusive leadership, it's about good leadership. I think it's important to say that because the work that we do for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, it is not different from business work. It is about organizational effectiveness, business results. It is about really tapping into the talents of people to maximize our impact as an organization, as leaders. And so it's not different, right? But I love that what we're saying is, if you don't have this lens, if you don't think about diversity as that force, that richness, then you're missing out as a leader, no matter how great you think you are in terms of managing supply chains and understanding financial analysis, right? There is the human element. It is what really unlocks the transformational potential.
We don't call it a ERG group, but we do have a group internally that's come together to ensure that we keep diversity and inclusion on top of mind. So we also do some affirmative action work to ensure that folks that are part of our talent community and our staff that we're representing, so that we have the mix to begin with, and then the inclusion, and try to really understand and be curious about our clients as well that we're working with. So it's not just about us, but also about the folks that we're working with and what they do.
A real concrete example of inclusive leadership that I've been part of was I had a manager, a leader, who opened a call up once by just starting off with jarring vulnerability about some issues. And what it did was it provided a psychologically safe place for us to then engage in the conversation more authentically. I think it's really important for those people who want to have the conversation or feel like they need to have the conversation to feel safe to do it. And that's a good step for a leader to take, is just by opening it up for people to start to interact with those types of conversations.
How do we enable leaders? I just had a client example. They do what I think is a really good job on this, which is they just provide a series of tools for leaders to use. I'll just give one example. They have something called an inclusion contact. So this is something that you do at the beginning of like a team meeting. So they get like a one pager on something. One example is challenge assumptions. So they'll get like a little video set of discussion questions to lead the group through, or they'll get like a self-assessment for everybody in the group to do 4 or 5 questions and then lead a discussion. And then those are all tied to the specific inclusion behaviors that they've identified that are important. And it also integrates it into what that team is already doing, instead of, to Andreas's point, having it in this, other silo, this thing that we go do, separate from our regular work. It integrates it into flow of work.